Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the go-to platform where faith-driven entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and experts share their stories, wisdom, and expertise to inspire and impact others. This isn't just another interview series. This is a strategic platform designed to amplify the voices of high-level entrepreneurs, which especially includes kingdom entrepreneurs who are making a real difference in their industries. My goal is simple: to serve you, the expert, by giving you a stage to share your message, expand your reach, and create lasting value for others. Through authentic, in-depth conversations, we uncover the real journeys, challenges, and victories behind today's leading experts. Each interview isn't just content. It's a powerful asset that helps you to establish authority, increase visibility, and connect with the right people. So with that, let's dive into today's episode. Once again, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another expert interview with Ken. And today I have special guest Maddie Andrews, and she is a mental health advocate, an MSW student, peer support specialist, nonprofit founder, and personal living and person living with serious mental illness and substance use history. She attends the University of North Carolina at Greensboro for her bachelor's degree, and she's currently attending the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for her master's. She has spent most of her life hiding who she is, and after almost dying in 2023, she decided to dedicate her life to healing, not just for her, but for her community. Walking life with mental illness hasn't been easy, but recovering for her and hope is real. So welcome, Maddie. I'm really, really excited to have you on today's episode. And so here's
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So here's how I want to start today. So I want to hand the microphone over to you. I want you to unpack your story, share all the things, and we will just conversate from there. So the microphone is
Sounds
yours, my
great.
friend.
So my story is long and complicated, and I'll try not to trauma jump too much. When I was 4, I had like a really traumatic experience happen to me, and when I reached out for help, initially I was shut down and told it was my fault and I was a bad kid, even though that wasn't the case. And I really began to develop PTSD because of that. But I lived in silence about it. And I mean, I stopped sleeping, became overly compliant, very anxious, and I walked this path alone. And then in middle school, I started developing hallucinations, paranoia, delusions, mood swings, mania, depression. But I had been coached for so long to be quiet about who I was. I didn't articulate this. And it's also in the sense that when you're a kid, you think everybody's the same. So you don't quite understand that other people aren't having delusions and mania and paranoia. And I didn't start to articulate this until I was about 14. I read a magazine article about a young woman with OCD, and it made me say, okay, is this something that's different about me? And I talked to my mom, who did take me to get diagnosed with OCD, but that was just the beginning for me. My symptoms really were driving me to have with interesting behaviors, I guess is one way to say it. I thought people lived in my bushes. I thought I was being stalked. I started to become a recluse from the depression. And when I was 19, I had to drop out of college and I came home and I told my mom that I felt like ending my life. And she got me to a hospital where my diagnosis was bipolar 1 disorder. Um, and the immediate reaction was medication, medication, medication. And I started having these wild side effects. Like I was there for a week, and when I left, I couldn't put my pants on. My weight was just ballooning so heavily. And the medications numbs me. So I couldn't process emotions. My hair was falling out. My vision was failing. these terrible symptoms. And I was walking through life with a mask on because I was told it was unsafe to tell people about this.
Mm.
So in public, I was really good at being, quote, normal. But at home, I was suffering so much on the inside. And in my 20s, my diagnosis changed again to what's called schizoaffective bipolar type, which means I have symptoms of both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And that was like a grief process to hear that. You know, that's a big, scary word. Um, and at that time in my life, I was so depressed that so my all-inclusive thought was always, I just needed to die. And I had self-harming behaviors. I had intense paranoia. Um, and I really just was a shell of a person for my 20s and part of my 30s, simply going through the motions. And then in 2023, they started a new medication, and I began to process emotions and do all the things that a typical person does. But unfortunately, my doctor was playing with my meds too much, and I had a major manic and psychotic episode. And part of my treatment was to increase a medication called lithium. Unfortunately, she did not get the necessary blood work when she upped my lithium, and I slowly began to die. I couldn't talk. I couldn't use a cell phone. I was in diapers. I couldn't swallow. I mean, you name it. I was losing it. And in December, I was hospitalized, and put in the ICU when I was dying. Like that, the bottom line is I was dying. And the treatment they gave me, which was mandatory to get the poison out, made my heart fail, made my lungs collapse. And when they did get the poison out with dialysis, the problem was I was not responsive. And they did an EEG that showed very little brain activity. So here I am, restrained in a ICU bed, not taking care of myself at all, not functioning. It looked like I was going to have what's called silent syndrome, but I didn't. One day I woke up and I tried to talk. I had no short-term memory. I had no idea what I had been through. And I tried to walk. And when I got home, initially, because I have amnesia, I just thought I was dying. Like I had no idea what was happening. But when I learned to read again and I read my medical records, this fire burned in my belly. And I was like, I spent my entire life feeling like death was the only answer. And here I am cheating death. So at that moment in my life, I said, I'm going to make a change. And I'm not just going to make a change for me, I'm going to make a change for my community and other people like me. And I sought out day treatment programs, specialists, therapy, you name it. And I took the information I learned and took it home with me. And I was able to recover at an exponential rate. And I was doing so well. And I was like, why is it that I was coached to be silent? And why is it the resources for people like me are so few and far between? So, on 4 months after coming home, I started my own nonprofit with the mission of mental health awareness, education, and community support. What we do is we offer free support groups virtually and in person. We also do public speaking to spread education and awareness. I am now a certified peer support specialist. I do have a job doing that as well as with the nonprofit. And then I decided that I wanted to do more. So I got into the top four graduate program in the country for social work, where I am working on my master's. My dream is to become an advocate, even more so than I am today, maybe on the level of policy change. I feel like my story gives me a unique experience to speak both professionally and personally. And there's not a lot of us out there doing that.
Mm. Totally, totally. Now, our topic today is taking trauma and turning it into motivation, right? And so, the first question that I want to ask you around your story and all the things there is you see, many people feel stuck in their trauma. What are the first steps someone can take to move away from that victim mindset of trauma and then go to survivor with motivation? So, what are some of those moves that a person can make?
Right. So the first step for me was definitely acceptance. Like, yes, I've been through this. yes, it happened, but what can I do in this very single moment to make the next moment better? What action can I take to heal myself? What action can I take to motivate myself? What resource can I lean on to better my life and get out of the hole? I think it's about being positive. I think it's about living in the moment. And I think a lot of it is about action.
Mm, totally. A lot of it is about action. That's definitely for sure. And reframing that mindset. So
Right.
taking those limiting and damaging beliefs and thoughts that are part of that mindset and then reframing them into something that's more empowering.
Right. Like, I don't look at my experiences and think of it woe is me, this happened to me. I look at it as a badge of honor, right? Like I'm strong, I'm a warrior, I'm a survivor. And I look at it as something to empower me, as something to help me help somebody else, instead of looking at it as a damaging type situation.
Mm, totally, totally. Now, it's interesting in your bio that I read in the beginning here. What is an MSW student?
Right. So I'm getting my master's in social work. That's what MSW stands for.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. The initial idea with that was to be a therapist and use grant funding because I believe mental health care needs to be equitable, affordable, and accessible, which it is not. And but in school, the beauty of this program is you learn the whole scope of social work. And I feel very driven to be an advocate. A lot of our policies may not be equitable, accessible. So my dream is to be a voice for people who don't have one yet.
Mm, so powerful. I love that. Now, another question that I have for you, getting a little bit more on the personal end, and if you are uncomfortable with sharing on what exactly happened around this, then please feel free to tell me as well. So, what was the trauma event that happened to you as a kid?
Right, I don't mind sharing at all. So when I was in preschool, I was sexually assaulted by another child, an older child. His parents worked there, and when he got off the bus, he sexually assaulted me and another kid. Um, and I told my teacher, she was also my babysitter, so I felt safe coming to her. And she told me this was my fault. And if I told my parents, I would be in a ton of trouble. She shamed me
Hmm.
into thinking that I asked for this. She shamed me into thinking I was the one who was wrong. And that's just not the way you should handle a situation like that.
So, you lived a good portion of your life believing that it really was your fault then.
You know, it really triggered this deep-rooted issue in me that I still work on today. So I don't like conflict and I don't like being in trouble. It's like this,
Hmm.
if there's some kind of misconception, the first thing I say is, I'm not a bad person. Like when I'm in crisis, that's like all I can say. It's like this deep-rooted fear in me, but I know that I can't live in that trauma either. So, I go to therapy and use the strategies my therapist told me and try to use a positive mindset and positive self-talk to reframe those beliefs because it wasn't my fault and I don't need to carry this with me for the rest of my life.
100%, 100%. So it's just so sad, and it's really surprising that to me that you got that kind of reaction out of your babysitter, or it's so surprising to me. And I am curious, which I do need to ask the question around that. Did she ever like how do I want to phrase this? Did she ever get did you ever like get that resolved with that particular person? No?
I didn't speak of it until I was about 16. I told my mom, and she was in such shock that she told me I was lying. And that was just more shame. So I
Mm,
really didn't talk about it until I was about 35, about a year ago. A year and a half ago, I started talking about it. And before that, I didn't say anything.
wow. Wow. That's a long time to carry something like that. Holy cow.
It
Wow.
is.
How has walking through trauma changed the way you view resilience and hope?
I always say resiliency, hope, and recovery are very real and very possible. I'm living proof. Um, I'm proud of my resiliency. I'm hopeful that I can continue to be resilient. And both of those things are a very important part of both mental health and substance use recovery, right? Because when you walk this path, it is very traumatic.
Mhm.
Most people you meet with either one or both have a lot of trauma in their history, but it takes the strength to overcome and the strength to be resilient, to enter recovery. And I just want, if anyone out there is listening and is struggling with any of these things, please know that hope is real. We do recover, it is possible.
Now, as you just mentioned there, hope and recovery are definitely real. What role has faith or any kind of spirituality played in keeping that hope alive for you, if any?
Right. So when I came home from the hospital, I shouldn't have been alive. The doctors told me that. They looked me in my face and told me I was going to die.
Mm,
And they told my husband that I wasn't going to recover. And here I am recovering. And they told me if I do recover, it's going to be years before I do anything normal again. 3 months later, I was back at work full time. And I was like, what else can this be but God? Like that nothing else makes sense here. So, I was just, it made me grateful to God and it made me feel like I had a bigger purpose. So I rely on that. And when I have, successes or I'm able to help somebody, I know it's because I'm here for somebody else, his mission. I know that's why my life was saved and it drives me a whole lot.
that's amazing. What are some lies that people believe about trauma and recovery that you feel called to dismantle? Now, I really want
There's
you
a
to
lot.
lean in and just like unpack that because that's a loaded question.
Not just trauma, but mental health in general. People have a lot of misconceptions about this topic. I hear people with mental illness are inherently violent, or people who talk about their trauma or talk about their anxiety or attention seeking, or men don't have mental health, or children don't have feelings, or if I go seek help, I'm weak. Um, all of these things are very false. You
Mhm.
know, we're all human beings, and when we go through trauma, it really triggers something inside of us, and it can trigger a mental health diagnosis. That's proven. And there's nothing wrong with getting help for that at all. In fact, it's brave and strong to get help. And we really, as a society, need to meet these strong people with kindness, empathy, compassion, and grace when they feel vulnerable enough to talk about it, because it takes a really strong person to do so.
It does. It does. Now, it's really interesting as we lean into this just a little bit more. So it's interesting, like even for me, like I totally identify and relate to the aspect of wanting to run away from anything conflict, wanting to like not, even it's funny, a real simple thing. Even when I'm sitting here and I'm writing stuff, trying to produce content and stuff, I often find that if I get stuck on something, my main coping mechanism is to not sit in the moment and work through that. What I usually catch myself doing, and this is why I can't have my phone on my desk anymore, is I usually catch myself picking up my phone and distracting myself from that moment instead of facing it. So what can you talk about in the aspect of trauma and conflict, giving people hope through that on how to in what's the word I want to use? How to become empowered and actually face that conflict, actually face that moment, and actually um, dismantle those thoughts. What does that look like for a person?
Right. That's difficult. And it took me, I think that's a lifelong process for me too, because I can totally relate to what you're saying, right? Like I bury my head in work, I bury my head in school, you know, I'm always busy and maybe it's because I don't want to think about what's really going on. But I've learned along the way that it's important for me to process things so that I can move on. Because if I don't, maybe I ruminate, maybe it pops up in the quiet moments It finds its way back in there. So having a safe space where you're ready to process these things, I think is the most important piece, right? Like I couldn't have come out of the hospital and immediately started working on my trauma work with the therapist. I wasn't ready. I wasn't safe. It took me about a year to get to that point. And having a professional or a good friend somewhere where it's safe for you to talk about it
Mm.
is an important piece. We can't just walk out on the street and start processing our trauma. That's not safe. And then, you know, it's going to be hard. So don't beat yourself up when you have a bad day working on this trauma or facing your mental health needs. You're still a human being who's going through a lot. So be kind to yourself amongst the process. And, time will help. Time helps a lot of things. And the more you work on it and the more you process it and the more you live in the moment, the easier it's going to get.
So, what if they feel like they have no one to talk to?
That is a good question. I felt like that in my life too. Obviously I didn't say anything for so many years. And if you don't have a friend and you don't have a partner, um, I think we need to create those safe spaces for ourselves. Like I have a therapist and I rely on her heavily and she's confidential, she's safe, she's respectful, and she has strategies. And when I started to work on my trauma, that's where I had to go, somewhere someone who was professional who could walk me through the journey because trauma work can be re-traumatizing, right? Like it might not be something we want to conquer on our own. So if someone has real trauma, I encourage them to reach out to a professional for help.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. It's really important. Even so, to add to what you said, it's important that even if a person feels like they've got nobody to go to, and that could be really easy to get into, like, well, who do I go to? This person might think this person might think that. The thing of it is even through those thoughts, worrying about what other people think about you can be a limiting thing as well. And here's the thing I want to add to what you're already saying that's just so powerful. If you're constantly worried about what other people are going to think, you're basically relying on the fact that you need them to accept you. And it's not until you release that need of needing them to accept you, to think this way, it's not until you release that and realize that most of the time, when you go through these patterns in your head of, oh, this person's going to think this person's going to think that, most of the time, it's so far from the truth. 90% of the time when people are thinking about what other people are thinking about them and different things like that, 90% of that is literally created in your head. And what's interesting it isn't until you go and talk to the person that you realize you were so far off with your assumptions inside your head and the self chatter and the talk. We often create those things inside our head.
I too totally agree. I used to be very quiet about who I was and my diagnosis and all those things because I was afraid of what people would say to me. I was afraid of the stigma. And obviously today I'm not. Like I'm doing this. I'm a very transparent person.
Mhm.
Um, but it took a lot for me to get there. And I can't lie if I say there aren't times where I worry about what people think. But what I have to remind myself is I love me and I know what I stand for and I know what I've been through and I know I'm a good person. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Absolutely, 100%. What would you say to the person who believes that their trauma literally disqualifies them from living out their calling?
That is not true at all. I mean, look at me. I wanted to go to school to be a therapist when I'm full of my own trauma. Like, a lot of people say, if you have mental illness or you have trauma, it excludes you from, not just work, but anything in life. And that's just not true. Like, you can do anything. Your trauma, your mental health diagnosis, any of this doesn't define you. You're still human. You still deserve happiness. You still deserve to achieve your dreams. No matter what you've been through, you deserve it.
You know, guys, and it's true. I mean, look at Maddie here. Look at how let's pull some like real simple things. Look at how communicative she is. Look at how intelligent she is. Look at how she comes across. Look at how she shows up on an interview like this. Look at all of these things. Now I'm going to ask the audience, does this sound like somebody who's nuts, who's crazy, or whoever? I don't think so. Maddie's coming across
Right.
as somebody who's very well put together, who's very intelligent, who knows what she's doing and has a passion now to help set other people free. So that should say volumes to the listeners today. And the other thing here is, okay, so for somebody listening right now who feels like their trauma has stolen their future, what's one or two mindset shifts or daily practices that can help them to begin turning pain into power, just like you've been able to do?
I think reframing the negative into positive, whether that be your mindset or your language, is a good first step. Like when you wake up, say something kind to yourself, say a positive intention for the day, create your day in the way you want it to be. And strategies like journaling can help you reframe that information, and setting goals, right? So instead of worrying about what's happened, set a goal for the future. What can I do in this moment to make the next best mess? Say you have a big dream and you feel like you can't achieve it. What baby step can you take to get there? And when you do that baby step, make sure you celebrate it because you're amazing for doing
Mm.
that.
Celebrating it. That is so powerful. There's so many people out there that I feel like focus on they focus on the losses. They focus on these so-called failures. And you know what's funny about failures? I was on the phone with one of my clients the other day, and I was coaching him through a moment where, he was taking steps to get to this particular goal, and he had stalled out at the last step before he finally reached the goal. And I finally challenged him with the question, with a couple questions, and then it finally came out. He's because I finally kind of leaned in and asked him, I'm just like, okay, this is just a small step over here. What's stopping you from getting to that step? And it finally came out of his mouth. And I was just so proud of him that it finally came out of my mouth, or came out of his mouth. He said, I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of getting there and then maybe somewhere along the line falling back. And I literally had to coach him through that and go, okay, what have you learned about embracing the weak moments? So this is part of what I teach my clients, embracing the journey. What have you learned about that? And he gave all the right answers, but he was actually dancing around what I was looking for. And and he finally got it. He finally leaned in on it and got it. And he's like, growth. I'm like, yes, that's it. Every weak moment, every time you fall off the horse and different things like that, you now get to embrace that, as you could embrace it and leverage it as a moment of growth. Failure is only failure when you stay there. And instead of staying there, you get to now leverage that, use it as a point to grow, to learn, to get wiser, to get better. And that's the key. See, a lot of people tend to, let's say, a journey of 60 days in a health and wellness journey. Let's say a person wants to lose 20 pounds and a journey of 60 days. Let's say they fell off the horse about 5 times during that 60 days, just to give an example. There's a lot of people out there that'll be fixated on those 5 days that they fell off the horse. And the thing about it is that's actually called the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset just sees that failure as the biggest thing, and they'll never develop into something bigger or better. Rather, of taking on a growth mindset literally changes the whole framework of that. Now those 5 days are seen as growth points. And better yet, a person with a growth mindset doesn't fixate on those 5 days. They fixate on the 55 days that they did not fall. That's a powerful mind shift. mindset shift that I think a lot of people need to adapt. It's so easy for us to take a look at our weaknesses and different things like that and allow those to define us.
I think that's a great point. And it goes, you can relate that right back to trauma. Like, we can't live in the past and we can't carry that with us for the rest of our life. We've got to do the work. We've got to make the growth. We've got to focus on the now. We've got to try to reframe. We've got to get professional help. We've got to talk to somebody. All these steps are a part of the growth mindset.
They are definitely. I mean, so that's kind of why I mentioned that because you can't let failure, and it's really not failure if you don't stay there. You can't let weaknesses define you. If you let it define you, you're part of the fixed mindset because that literally is what happens with the fixed mindset. I'll never get there. This is just the way it is. It must be in my genes. You've heard all that before, right? And you might even said it yourself, but you don't get to stay there because
I think
Go ahead.
I think when we're talking about trauma, that can be a hard thing to do though, right? Because trauma can be haunting. Like, look how long it took me to start to process my trauma from
Mm,
4 to 35. But I think the overarching message here is that it is possible. We
yes.
can do it. We absolutely can. You can do it. We might be sitting here with new trauma and thinking, how can I ever get past this? But I'm telling you from experience, you can, and your life can be beautiful.
Now, it took you how many years to get past your trauma?
You know, I started having trauma at 4, and I consider my recovery time when I was 35. So it took me from 4 to 35 to truly process what I had been through.
Now, let me lean in on that just for a minute here. So, for somebody listening today that's going, I don't want it to take me that long to get over trauma. Oh my gosh, is it
No,
going to, Maddie, are you telling me it's going to take that
no, no,
long for
no,
me
no,
to get
no,
it?
no, no.
So, I want you to lean in on that a little bit.
Right. I think we have to remember I was a kid too, and I was a kid who wasn't sharing. So I wasn't getting any kind of help with my trauma. And along the way, I kept getting re-traumatized with new baggage and new events. So, you know, it really took me almost dying to shake my world and want to really truly work on that trauma. You know, I was just kind of sitting in it all that time and continuously getting re-traumatized. But when I set my mind to it, after I almost died. And let's say that was just like February, right? February 2024. I was like, okay, I'm going to change my life. March 2024, I was back at work full time. April 2024, I started my nonprofit. October 2024, my first support group opened and I was in grad school. So, I might have sat in it a long time, but the exponential rate of me working through it was phenomenal.
It sounds like the exponential rate took you roughly about a year. So, real time, it was about a
Right.
year.
Yes, I would say after a year, I was in a really good spot. And I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. Does it revisit me from time to time? Absolutely. But now I have tools in place that I've learned and strategies and coping skills. And when I need help, I'm not afraid to ask for it. Like I will call a friend. I will call my therapist. I will talk to my husband. I will do all the things I need to do to get over what I'm facing. And I rely on that toolbox of skills because I don't want to go backwards. But recovery isn't a linear process. We're going to have bad days and we're going to have bad moments. That's just part of how it works. But be kind to yourself in those bad days and bad moments. You're still a human being.
100%, definitely. I think that's really, really powerful. Now, as we kind of begin to wrap up a little bit, here's what I would love for you to lean into. So, over this whole entire journey that you've had, from 4 to current day, and then the year of real transformation that you had, what you now get to do with people is coach them through and show them how they can not take years to recover, show them how they can kind of, if you will, shortcut their journey. Not that there's like a special secret quick fix. There's definitely things that need to be worked through in that. But see, you now have the tools. So as we're wrapping up this interview a little bit here, I want you to share um, 3 to 5 of those powerful strategies and tools that you have gotten from this journey. So, in other words, what do you want to leave the audience with today in that?
I think the most important lesson I learned along the way is that I'm a human. And, I'm just like everybody else. I'm going to have feelings. I'm going to have emotions. I'm going to have good days and bad. That's just part of the game, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, another life lesson that went on with that is to be kind to myself when I have those bad days or when I have that weak moment. Self-love is an important part of the healing journey. We really need to be kind to ourselves. And let's see. I think my overarching message is just in general, if you meet someone with trauma, if someone's talking to you about this, meet them with kindness, meet them with empathy, meet them with compassion,
Mm.
because it takes a lot for somebody to say that to somebody. And I'm telling you, they're negative enough in their own head. They have enough going on without the outside world beating them down too. And that kindness, that empathetic mindset might be a fleeting moment for you, but it can be a life-saving tool for someone else. And when you do start to recover and you do make a step past your trauma, like I said earlier, celebrate those things because you made a huge leap. It's progress. Progress doesn't happen overnight, but and then be mindful. Mindfulness is an important key tool in this. Live in the moment, live in the now. Try not to
Mm.
go backwards because we can't go change the past, right? Like we can only live in the now and set ourselves up for success in the future. And that's a hard thing to do when you live with trauma. Maybe you have flashbacks or bad thoughts from the past, but we can't change that. Just try to live in the now as much as you possibly can.
So good and so powerful. So I hope you guys wrote down those strategies and tools that she just shared. And, to be honest with you, Maddie has shared a lot of gold already on this interview as well. So it's amazing. But yeah, focus on the win, you guys. Even the smallest little step that seems insignificant. If it's a small step forward, celebrate that, sit in it, bask in it. Just um, drench yourself in that moment, if you will. Sit in it. Celebrate the wins, even as small as they may be. And the other thing that I'll add here as well, something that my own coach has taught me, the journey, it's not always going to be neat. It's not always going to be clean. Embrace the messy. Embrace the
Love it.
messy. Yeah. Don't be afraid to do things messy. It's like my coach always says, do it messy if you've got to. And I love that because it basically, dismantles the perfectionism mindset. And that is definitely something that doesn't get to happen in this journey either, because you're not going to be perfect. You're human and you're going to have weaknesses, shortcomings, and all that other stuff. You get to give yourself grace. You get to be patient with yourself. Patience over perfection. That's another thing I teach. Patience over perfection, because it's never going to be perfect. You think that, you may think the journey might be a linear path. No, it's not. It's often like this. And then what it often actually feels like is this, like it's all over the place. And you're just like, what the heck is happening? Um, so patience over perfection, celebrate the wins, and be present in the moment. Recognize those thoughts that are coming across that are damaging, that are no longer serving you, and learn to dismantle those unlimited beliefs. So, any last thoughts that you would like to share on this?
If somebody is struggling, please know you're not alone. That's one reason I'm so transparent and one reason I'm so open if one person can connect to what I'm saying and feel less alone in this world, then my job is done. And anybody living not just trauma, but mental illness, you're my superhero. You inspire me. Keep fighting, guys. You've got this.
Amen. Amen. I love that so much. Now, Maddie, how can people get into your world, connect with you, and work with you if they want to?
Right.
Um,
Right. The best way, our website has my email on it. Our website is jesupport.org. That's for the support, my nonprofit JNE support group. Email is usually the fastest way to get me, or you can fill out the form on our website. I love collaboration. I love like-minded people, and I love lifting voices. If you have a voice and a story that you want to share, I love to hear it. And if you need resources and don't know where to go, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Awesome. You guys, below this video in the description below is going to be her bio and the links on how you can connect with her and get into Maddie's world. I really encourage you guys, click those links, get into her world, connect with her, work with her if you want to work with her, but connect with her. And all of that's going to be in the description below. So as we are closing up, maybe this is your first time seeing any kind of content from me and you're kind of wondering, okay, well, this is great with Maddie, but who's this Ken guy? What is he about? What does he do? So honestly, you guys, hey, I've lost 62.5 pounds and I've kept it off for 7+ years now, all without a diet and having that be sustainable. And right now, I am giving away my 3 secrets to help you to lose weight, feel energized, and get healthy without starving or dieting. Literally in just 3 one-on-one sessions with me, I expose the 3 biggest lies that are keeping people sick, stuck, and overweight because that's how that industry makes money. And I empower them with the truth to be able to finally break free and fuel their body God's way and break free and keep the weight off for life like I've been able to easily and sustainably without a diet. And so the link to get into what I call my mini educational boot camp is going to be below all Maddie stuff. So you below all Maddie stuff, you will see the links to get into my world, connect with me, work with me, all that stuff. That boot camp is powerful. And so you'll find the links to that as well as other links to get into my world as well. So with that, you guys, have a great rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day you are listening. And we will catch you on the next Expert Interviews with Ken. Thank you so much.